Have you ever been on the cusp of something really wonderful, really exciting, really life-changing, but you're not quite there yet? And you're thrilled because it looks like it's coming, but you're terrified that it may not.
Yeah.
Something that you've worked on for days, weeks, months, for years. Something that seemed impossible at first, but now it looks like it might happen. And you're getting really close, but you're not there yet. That's how I feel about flipping the Virginia House this year.
Yeah, I feel you.
And I was thinking back to a couple moments, actually still one step down, a couple moments in my life that were very much like that. Two moments, life-changing moments in my life where I felt exactly the feeling that I feel now. And the first, many of you know, was after the murder of my sister. She was killed in 1996. It took us 10 years to get justice, and we were told it was impossible to get justice. There was just no way. He'd fled to Mexico, taking the kids with him. We went to court, and we had a court rule against us, that we had no right to take my niece and nephew. Didn't matter if he killed my sister. The court said, I still can see the text, you can look it up, I'll show you sometime. It's in F-SUP, it's in the books, that said that spousal abuse, the court said, was not child abuse, according to the statute. The judge said that the Levines, my parents, that we did not allege that my sister was murdered in front of her children, and therefore, how could it be child abuse? The judge had a very limited understanding of the law. The judge didn't seem to understand what I think any 6-year-old child would tell you, which is that she or he would rather be beaten within an inch of their life than to lose their mother. So the very first bill I ever wrote was a Tennessee law. Obviously I wasn't in the Tennessee legislature, I was just a citizen. I went to Tennessee and I said, spousal abuse is child abuse. And when you beat your wife, you're not a good dad. And if you kill your wife, you're a really bad dad. And I didn't think that was so hard for people to understand, and indeed it was not. And the legislature passed the law unanimously. There was a Republican House and a Democratic Senate, it didn't matter, passed unanimously. The first law I ever got passed was in Tennessee.
Wow, sure.
But we weren't out of the woods yet. He had run to Mexico, avoiding the murder charges. He had the kids with him. And I still remember that day. It was almost 10 years to the day after my sister had been killed, when we're back in Tennessee, back before a court, and the judge is about to apply my law, the law that I wrote, not really for my family, I just wrote because I thought it was wrong. I never thought we'd see the kids again, to bring my niece and nephew home after 10 years in exile. And I still remember sitting there thinking, it's looking good, it's got to work, all the things are in place for it to work, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to be despondent, I'm going to be terrified, I'm going to be hopeless, I'm going to give up all hope, the thought of what could have happened was terrifying. And then we did it, and we brought my niece and nephew home. And for those of you who don't know, my former brother-in-law is serving a 56-year sentence in the Tennessee Penitentiary, and good riddance.
Yeah.
The second time I felt this feeling was in the marriage equality movement. Now, many of you know I was a very early player in the marriage equality movement, crazy early. So I've lived in Alexandria 18 years, but 20 years ago I lived in California. And 20 years ago, when I brought to an openly gay member of the California Assembly the idea of full marriage equality, that gay people could get married just like straight people, she laughed at me. She said, Mark, we will never see marriage equality in our lifetimes. I said, well, not if you talk about it like that, we won't.
Never say never.
And she said, Mark, why don't you go help people with AIDS? I think that's a really good cause. And I said, you know what, that is a good cause. It's a great cause. Lots of people are fighting that cause. No one is fighting this cause. This is the cause that I want to fight. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm a co-founder of Marriage Equality California, the second oldest in the United States. And I wrote the very first marriage equality bill in the nation. Back in California, that was my second bill that I wrote. And when I wrote that bill, it was considered so radical, just 20 years ago, so radical, that the established gay community opposed it. Lambda Legal Defense Fund said it was too radical. We should just do hospital visitation. And I said, well, hospital visitation is a good thing. That's 6 of my 2,000 rights. That's pretty good. I said, let's do the bill for full equality, and we'll do your bill as well. And they'll hate my radical bill. They'll support your bill. It'll be good. Good cop, bad cop. And they said no. And I learned how politics works. That's a longer story. I'll tell you some other time if you really want to ask me. But I continued. I moved here, went to work for Barney Frank. Many of you know that. I wrote DC's marriage equality bill with Phil Mendelson, which became law, defended it in court. And then I remember that fateful day in 2015, that day just like today. I heard the arguments in the United States Supreme Court. I felt we had the 5-4 vote. I felt Kennedy was going our way. I thought so, but I didn't know. And the decision was coming down that day. And I remember thinking, I think it's going to be good. It's just around the corner, it's just out of reach. It seems good, but oh my God, what happens if it's not? What happens if they go the wrong way? What happens if after all this work, the Supreme Court says to millions of Americans, I'm sorry, you don't have equality under the law. We don't respect your rights. But it didn't. That was a very joyous day. Some of you see me with the gay flag in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. That's one of my favorite pictures. That's me. I didn't bring that to the Supreme Court. No, that's a battle I began but didn't finish. And then I think to 2016. And maybe I was a little complacent in 2016.
Yeah.
But I remember election night, 2016.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, it feels right. The polls look good, right? He's a madman. They can't possibly vote for him. And she's fantastic. And I'm a little nervous. And oh my God, what's James Comey doing? Oh, that's terrible, you know. But it looks good. And then the bottom dropped out. And everything went wrong. And I know you felt like I did that night. Your heart just sunk, and it's like, oh my God, where's this country I live in, and how could, you know, all right, I didn't like George Bush, but okay, you know, I didn't like Ronald Reagan, but this guy, this guy.
But then we had 2017.
We did indeed. I'm getting to that. I'm getting there, Kathy. She's ahead of me. So, I've been on both sides of that. Where you work and you struggle and you push the boulder up to the top of the hill and you want to get over on the other side and you think you're going to get it there, but sometimes it rolls back and crushes you. And after 2016, people in Virginia and across the nation were pretty depressed. Democrats, liberals, progressives. I mean, it was hard to crawl out of bed for me, and I think for most of you here. And then I look at Virginia. So this year, this month, give or take a month or two, is the 400th anniversary of the Virginia House of Delegates, the Virginia House of Burgesses, the body in which I sit. I am one of 100 of the oldest representative body in the Western Hemisphere. Where I sit in my body was George Washington, was James Madison, was Thomas Jefferson, who designed the Capitol. And we just went down to Jamestown, right? 400 years ago in July, oldest representative body in the Western Hemisphere, the beginning of democracy in the Americas. And then 3 weeks later, what did we also commemorate? Beginning of slavery in America. That first African brought by a British pirate from a Portuguese slave ship. 3 weeks after we start democracy in America, we start the original sin of slavery. The yin and yang of American history, right? Right there, right in Virginia, right at the outset, within 3 weeks of each other. The greatest good and the greatest evil, right there.
Right.
And what's happened for the last 400 years? Well, let's see. We had 150 years under British rule. Then we had another 100 years with slavery. Then we had arguably 2 years of progressive government, maybe in Reconstruction under Union troops, as far as that would go. That was maybe the most progressive Virginia's ever gotten. Then another 100 years of Jim Crow, of Ku Klux Klan, of lynching, another 100 years up into massive resistance in the 1950s. The Democrats, let's be fair, were the bad guys then. The bird machine, they controlled everything. Those were conservatives, but they were Democrats. That's when the Democrats were in control. And just as the Democratic Party starts to change in the 80s and 90s, the Republicans take over and controlled for 25 years or so. When I entered the Virginia House of Delegates in 2015, people were like, Mark, what do you think you're doing? What can you change? What can you possibly change? There were 32 when I ran, 33 when I ran. And when my year, 2015, we gained a seat. We gained one seat in the House of Delegates in 2015. We went from 33 to 34. They could no longer we could no longer override the governor's vetoes. And that was good. And I did a little calculation. I said, okay, if we win one seat every 2 years, we'll be in charge of the Virginia House of Delegates in 2049, when I'm 83 years old. Progress is slow sometimes. Look at the civil rights movement, right? I mean, we're getting there. And people are like, Mark, and I served in the minority. I served with Barney Frank. I know what it's like to be in the minority. You don't have that. You have more power in the United States Senate as the minority than we certainly had in the Virginia House of Delegates in the minority. And so, like getting justice for my sister, like marriage equality, we got to work. You got to work. All of you got to work. And all of you, the Alexandrians, the Arlingtonians, Fairfax, we became a blue army, right? We conquered this area and we went out to conquer the rest of Virginia. And I know virtually every one of you, and I know how hard each and every one of you worked in 2017 and went down to Prince William and went to Loud. People like Dorothea Peters, who does Democrats to Go.
Hey, Dorothea,
everyone here, how else? I mean, if I keep naming names, I'm going to have to name everyone here because all of you worked so hard. And what happened?
We
right?
won
We
15
won.
seats.
We won 15 seats. And I remember on election night thinking, okay, I think we can get 6 to 8. I think we can get 6 to 8. If we only get 5, I'm going to be disappointed. If we only get 5, I think we get 6 to 8. If we get 10, I told everyone I'll be ecstatic if we got 10. We got 15. Beyond any of us ever expecting we could get.
Yep.
And what do we do with 49? You know what we did. We got Medicaid expansion, right?
Yep.
We got dedicated metro funds. We got pay raises for teachers, 5%. We did a lot of good. But as I often say, 2 is greater than 15. When is 2 greater than 15? In the Virginia House of Delegates. We're at that point now. We're at that point where we've pushed the rock up to the top of the hill. We're at that point where it's just out of reach. I'll mix metaphors here. We've been wandering around in the cave and there's that light. There's that light at the end of the tunnel, right? And we're reaching and we're grasping for it and it's exciting because we can do this. The Senate, we've already won the Senate. The Senate, we're fine in the Senate, but the House, it's gonna be close, folks. And we're really, really close. And if you're like me, you're terrified. You're excited and you're terrified. Because, just for a moment, I want you to consider if we don't do it. If on the 400th anniversary of the Virginia House of Delegates, House of Burgesses, imagine we don't do it. Imagine how happy that orange narcissist in the White House would be if we don't do it. Imagine how much those goons patrolling Old Town with their AK-47s, imagine how much they'll start patrolling if we don't flip the House. Think of all those people hardworking for $7.25 an hour and never earning even a wage to get them out of poverty. Think how sad they'll be if we don't flip the House. Whatever your issues, think about climate change. We will do nothing about climate change if we don't flip the House. If we don't flip the House, we won't pass the Equal Rights Amendment.
Right.
It just won't happen.
Right. And if we do,
So I want you to be appropriately terrified before I get to the if we do.
Don't forget about guns.
Because, well, I said gun safety. I mean, that's the clearest and biggest example. Nothing will, I assure you, if we don't flip the House, I don't care what they do in the Senate. If we don't flip the House, I assure you, zero zilch, nothing will be done about gun safety.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I fear that we could have an incident more than we've already had in Alexandria, down in Del Rey. We could have an incident in Old Town. Those 6 goons could have shot hundreds of people within minutes.
Wow.
They could have. That's what those guns are designed to do. We have to act now to prevent tragedy in the future. We don't want anyone to say that we didn't act and tragedy happened that we could have stopped. The time is now. So everyone here has been very generous, and I really want to thank all of you here. If you can be a little more generous, I want you to understand what's at stake here. More importantly, when we're done here, the reason we're videotaping this is I want you to share this with your friends who maybe haven't given. They need to know what's at stake. What's at stake is the entire future of Virginia. We have waited 400 years to have a progressive majority in Virginia. And this year, in 2 months, we can do it. The time is now. We can turn the page on Virginia history. We can raise the minimum wage. We can pass the Equal Rights Amendment. We can have meaningful gun safety laws, finally. We can, everything from fighting climate change to having real criminal justice reform, whatever your issue is, suddenly you'll have an ear. So I just want you to imagine the rocks at the top of the hill. It can go over, it can fall back upon us, or it can go over to the other side. With your help, we will move it to the other side.
Yeah.
That's all I now want to introduce the senior senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia, former governor, the man who I think in the Senate is doing the most to keep our president at bay and on his heels with his great work in the Senate Intelligence Committee. I want him to spill all the secrets tonight. I don't think he will, though. But Senator Mark Warner's long history of service and his present service is part of what's keeping us sane in these troubled times. I give to you, Senator.